My mother always said that family was a circle where everyone belonged. But 7 years ago, on Thanksgiving, I found out exactly where my place in that circle really was: outside, standing on the cold concrete of her front porch. Inside, the dining table was perfectly set for 8 people. Gleaming silverware, crystal glasses, and the warm aroma of roasted turkey filled the house. My dinner, though, was waiting for me on a flimsy paper plate beside the doormat. A sticky note from my mom read, "You with us. Eat here or go." I didn't shed a single tear. Not one. I just picked up the plate, walked back to my car, and drove completely out of their lives. For 7 years, they believed they had successfully thrown me away. They thought I was broken. But yesterday, my sister tracked me down at my new address. What she saw made her hand shake so badly she dropped her phone. Then the calls started. 89 missed calls in a single hour. My name is Clara, and I am 34 years old. If you looked at my life today, you'd see a woman standing firmly on her own 2 feet. But getting here took a long, painful road. 7 years ago, my world looked completely different. It was Thanksgiving evening, and the crisp autumn air had a sharp bite to it. But honestly, the cold outside was nothing compared to what was waiting for me at my childhood home. Growing up, I was always the obvious black sheep of the family. My sister Chloe was the golden child, destined for elite universities and corporate boardrooms. Me? I preferred the raw, honest work of my own hands, eventually becoming an apprentice welder and mechanic. My family looked at my grease-stained overalls like they were some kind of badge of shame. That Thanksgiving, I arrived a few minutes late, straight from a brutal shift at the shop. As I walked up the driveway, I could see through the dining room window. The table inside was beautifully arranged with expensive linen, sparkling crystal glasses, and a magnificent roasted turkey sitting right in the center. My mother and siblings were already inside, laughing, talking, and raising their glasses in celebration. But when I reached the front door, I stopped cold. There wasn't a place for me inside. Instead, sitting right there on the concrete porch beside the doormat, was a flimsy paper plate piled with cold leftovers. Tucked beneath a fork was a bright neon sticky note in my mother's unmistakable handwriting. "You aren't clean enough to sit with us. Eat here or go." The cold grease from that paper plate stained my fingers, but what my family had done stained something much deeper. I didn't knock on the door. I didn't make a scene. I didn't beg. I simply turned around, walked back to my beat-up car, threw the plate in the trash, and drove away. That night, I made myself one silent promise: they would never again have the chance to look down on me. No way. The very next morning, I took drastic steps to erase myself from their world. I changed my phone number, deleted every one of my old social media accounts, and packed everything I owned into the back of my car. Then I moved 3 states away to a city where nobody knew my name or the suffocating expectations my family had forced on me for years. Those first few years were absolutely brutal. I worked 80-hour weeks in a dark, drafty commercial garage. My muscles ached constantly, and my hands were covered with fresh cuts and burns nearly every single day. I lived on instant noodles and slept on a mattress lying directly on the floor of a tiny studio apartment. I never received a single dime from my family, and honestly, I didn't want one. I was rebuilding my life from the ground up, fueled by nothing but quiet determination and the burning need to prove them wrong. Before I tell you what my sister found when she finally tracked me down, stick with my story until the very end. And while you're here, drop the city you're watching from in the comments so I can see just how far this journey has reached. Because while my family figured I was broken, flat broke, and down for the count, I was quietly building something far bigger than they could have ever imagined. 7 years of complete silence can change a person. It hardens your resolve while softening the sharp edges of old pain. I had finally found my peace, surrounded by the heavy scent of motor oil and the steady hum of industrial machinery. For the first time in my life, I felt like I truly belonged. It was a crisp Tuesday afternoon, and I was fully focused on fabricating a custom chassis for a high-end client when a sudden shadow stretched across the wide entrance of my open garage. I wiped the sweat from my forehead, pulled off my heavy welding mask, and squinted into the bright afternoon sunlight. Standing there, looking completely out of place against the backdrop of steel and machinery, was my sister, Chloe. Those 7 years had changed her too. The effortless confidence of the family's golden child had completely disappeared. Her expensive clothes looked wrinkled, her face was drained with exhaustion, and her hands trembled slightly as she clutched a thick, worn manila folder tightly against her chest. She stared at me with wide eyes, taking in my grease-stained overalls and the heavy tools scattered around the shop. She clearly hadn't expected to find me working in a place like this. Heck, you could tell she was completely thrown off. Before I could even say a word, Chloe stepped forward, looking absolutely desperate. She explained that she'd spent weeks tracking me down because our family was caught in the middle of a catastrophic crisis. The family business was collapsing under a mountain of hidden debt. Our mother was staring straight at total financial ruin, and they were desperately searching for a major private investor willing to buy them out. Chloe stood there, her eyes darting around the massive, state-of-the-art facility. She looked right past me, completely unaware of what was actually standing in front of her. I was told the principal investor of Apex Custom Design lives and works on this estate, she said, her voice tight with urgency. I need to see them immediately, Clara. Our family's entire future depends on this meeting, and I seriously don't have any time to waste. I glanced down at the grease covering my hands, then looked back at my sister. The irony of the moment wasn't lost on me. Follow me, I said calmly. I tossed my heavy wrench onto a nearby tool cart and led her out of the busy garage bay. We walked across the spotless courtyards toward the sleek glass front office building that stood at the center of the commercial estate. Chloe stayed close behind me, gripping that folder like it was a lifeline, still assuming I was nothing more than a low-level mechanic, or maybe just someone renting workspace on the property. I pulled open the heavy glass doors, walked straight past the front reception desk, and stepped into the spacious executive office. Without the slightest hesitation, I walked around the massive mahogany desk and settled comfortably into the high-backed executive leather chair. Chloe stopped dead in the middle of the room. Her jaw literally dropped as she watched me. Have a seat, Chloe, I said calmly, leaning forward and resting my elbows on the spotless desk. You said you came here looking for the owner, the principal investor with the power to buy out the family's debt. I held her stunned gaze. Well, you're looking at her. I own this entire estate. Chloe remained frozen where she stood. The thick manila folder slipped from her trembling hands, scattering papers all across the polished floor. She stared at me, then looked down at the official business registration documents she had brought with her. Slowly, the pieces started falling into place. The name of the multi-million-dollar investor she'd been desperately searching for was the very same sister they had thrown away 7 years earlier. No way, she whispered under her breath. Her face turned completely pale. In a state of absolute shock, she yanked her phone from her pocket. Without saying another word, she lifted it, snapped a crystal-clear photo of me sitting behind the executive desk, and posted it straight into our old family group chat. Beneath the picture, her shaking fingers typed just one sentence. You all need to see this, right now. I watched as the messages appeared on her screen. The family group chat, which had been buzzing all morning with panic over their financial disaster, suddenly went completely silent. For 2 full minutes. Not a single person replied. The shock hit them hard. Then everything absolutely exploded. My old number was still blocked, but Chloe's phone suddenly started vibrating nonstop in her hand. It didn't just ring. It practically screamed with incoming calls and notifications. Within a single hour, she had 89 missed calls and hundreds of frantic messages from our mother, our brother, and every relative who had looked the other way 7 years earlier while I was being humiliated on that porch. Chloe's face had completely lost its color. With trembling hands, she answered the incoming call and slowly tapped the speakerphone button. Instantly, our mother's voice filled the executive office. Gone was the disgust she'd once spoken to me with. Now her voice dripped with desperate, fake sweetness. Clara, sweetheart, is that really you? She asked, her voice trembling with carefully rehearsed warmth. Chloe just sent the photo. We're also incredibly happy to see how well you've done for yourself. In fact, we were just talking about you." She paused before continuing. "The holidays are almost here, and I've already set the main dining table. There's a beautiful seat waiting right in the center, exactly where you belong. Please come home early this year so we can celebrate together as a family." I listened to every word she said, and I felt absolutely nothing. The emotional hold she once had over me disappeared the moment that paper plate hit the porch floor 7 years ago. "The table's set for me, Mom?" I asked, my voice calm, steady, and almost icy. "That's funny, because 7 years ago, you wrote that I wasn't clean enough to sit at your table. You told me to eat out on the concrete porch by the doormat, or leave." I chose to leave. A long, suffocating silence settled over the line. Then she started stumbling over her words, throwing out one excuse after another about how stressful that night had been, how things were misunderstood, and how she never really meant it that way. I didn't let her finish. "I'm not coming home," I said firmly. "And I'm not giving you a single dime to bail out your failing company." Another heavy silence followed. "But," I continued, "I'll give you one legal option. My company will purchase the family home directly from the bank and clear your personal debt." There was an immediate gasp on the other end of the phone. However, I added without changing my tone, "The deed transfers to me the moment the sale is finalized. You'll have exactly 30 days to pack your things and find somewhere else to live." Nobody said a word. For the first time in my life, my family had absolutely no control over me. 3 months later, the dust had finally settled, and every document had been signed. True to my word, I bought the family home, paid off their debt, and my mother moved into a modest apartment she could actually afford. I sold the remaining family assets that Chloe and my brother couldn't manage, and I invested every dollar of the proceeds into expanding my business even further. As for me, I moved into a beautiful, quiet cottage overlooking the valley. It became my peaceful sanctuary, where the air was fresh and the only sound was the gentle rustling of the wind through the trees. For the very first time in my adult life, I was living completely on my own terms, answering to absolutely no one but myself. But I didn't want my success to be measured only by money. I never forgot the young woman who once stood alone on a freezing porch, holding a paper plate because her own family believed she wasn't worthy of a seat at their table. So I created a foundation dedicated to changing that. Today, we fund trade school scholarships and provide professional tools for young women entering blue-collar careers, making sure anyone who's ever been told they weren't clean enough for success gets the opportunity to build an empire of their own. Now I want to ask you something. What would you have done if you'd found that paper plate waiting for you on the porch all those years ago? Would you have helped your family after they came back begging? Or would you have walked away, just like I did? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And before you go, you'll see 2 more stories on the final screen that have become fan favorites on this channel. Trust me, you won't want to miss them. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the very end.